For all the accusations politicians make about people supposedly abusing loopholes, the rich exploit tax loopholes to pay the minimum amount required by law, as everybody does. Gun buyers exploit the non-existent gun show and internet loopholes. Or my favorite, Kyle Rittenhouse used a self-defense loophole. We got to fix that one. If it wasn't for the loophole, his face would have been properly boot welded into the ground. For all the talk of loopholes, there is nobody who loves a good loophole more than a government agent, not just to get around any old generic law. They love it to get around the foundational law, the Constitution itself. They love their First Amendment loophole. Oh, it's not censorship if we just delegate it to our friends in private business. We in the White House aren't banning your post. We're just flagging it as a good one for Zuck and Company to take care of through their own private, constitutionally ungoverned action. They love their Second Amendment loophole. Oh, we're not banning the sale of guns. No, we're just creating a legal environment so burdensome that few people can make a profit in the industry because some private actor will sue them into the ground. But don't worry, you can still make your own guns for now, until we get our mitts on that one too. See, it's not government abuse when a private actor does it. That's what we're told. Just please don't look behind the curtain because the government's back there pulling all the levers on these private actors. For some reason, they don't call these loopholes, even though they are direct betrayals of the spirit and philosophy of our foundational law. But as much blame as our government betters deserve for that sabotage, we as citizens and consumers have played a part in it too. Plenty of us cheer when social media companies do the censorship bidding of Washington. Plenty of us donate to lawsuit efforts that'll undermine our self-defense rights. And all politics aside, nearly all of us commodify ourselves in an emerging surveillance state. Every single day, we submit a wealth of information to megacorporations that became megacorporations by monetizing the information that we gave them. Sometimes it's more knowingly, sometimes it's less, but we have surrendered our information into a scheme that assists government surveillance in a way much broader and much easier than government alone could ever do under proper constitutional constraints. Combine the massive business of phone data harvesting with the government's thirst for actual legal loopholes, and we get another variation in the outsourcing of the violation of your rights, the circumvention of the warrant. It's an interesting legal question now emerging. Instead of seizing your information in a way the Fourth Amendment protects against, the government just buys it from the data business that collected it. No warrant necessary, because if they have consent to search and seize, well, they don't need a warrant. And if they have a bottomless purse full of blank checks, they can buy a hell of a lot of consent. It's a trend that's been developing for years. Several federal agencies, the IRS, DEA, FBI, DHS, Defense Department, ICE, and more, they've all purchased phone location data from companies that harvest the information from apps and willingly participate in this government snooping because it's a big cash cow. These data deals are millions of dollars in revenue for these companies. So just to be clear on the arrangement here, the government takes your money and then uses it to buy your data. There's an argument that it's double theft, not just spying. But if you don't comply, you're the one who goes to jail. And of course, in the context of coronavirus, we've explored many of the deeper depths of government corruption, so it's not at all surprising that the CDC would be the latest alphabet agency to engage. They have an unquenchable thirst for control and no self-control to stop. The CDC, of course, pushed an illegal eviction moratorium even after the courts intervened. The CDC continues to fight for the all-important power to force a mask on your face in between pretzel bites. And as of Tuesday, yes, it is reported the CDC tracked millions of us by phone location data to see just how good and obedient we were being with lockdown orders. The information was acquired through a public records request by Vice News, which shows the CDC is using this exact model. They aren't searching and seizing your data. They're just purchasing it. The CDC bought access to location data harvested from our phones. No probable cause needed, no warrant needed. Just a big check and a handshake among friends in the data business. The CDC then used the data to monitor lockdown compliance and neighbor-to-neighbor visits and church visits and more. If you went somewhere, they know about it. But don't worry, though. It's not like they're kicking down your apartment door. They just purchased a key from the landlord, and now they're helping themselves to their new property. And of course, they promise to be very courteous roommates. They would never use the data to identify you individually. Or so they want you to believe. The data the CDC bought is supposedly anonymized, meaning the movements are not tied to individual identities, at least in the dataset itself. But several researchers and journalists note identifying individuals isn't even difficult, let alone impossible. It's often just connecting a few dots with other publicly available information. The New York Times did it with ease in a detailed story on the issue back in 2018. They spoke with a woman whose location data was part of a similar data collection. As a technical matter, this woman was just one anonymized dot in the set, but as a practical matter, the New York Times was able to identify her individually. This can be done just by piecing together information from publicly available sources, your address, your friend's address, your work address, your church's address. If they know anything about your behavior from social media or elsewhere, they can find who you are and where you go. In this particular data set, with updates as frequent as every 2 seconds. Well, that's her fault, you might think. She's the one who volunteered her data. She doesn't get to be surprised to see that she's tracked nearly every second of every day. As the CEO of one of these data firms says, you'd have to be pretty oblivious if you're not aware of what's going on. You're receiving these services, as in various apps, for free because advertisers are helping monetize and pay for it. And sure, I agree that personal and consumer responsibility are important. Read the terms, don't just check the box. However, the terms aren't always full disclosures either. The New York Times review of 17 apps responsible for sending this location data showed that just 4 told users in a prompt during the permission process that their information could be used for advertising. And further complicating the matter, even if I understand that they're selling my location data to advertisers and I consent, I don't think of federal agencies as advertisers. I think of them as spies. Because they are. They aren't selling anything. They deal only in the business of force. And just like we shouldn't trust the supposed anonymous nature of the data, we'd be foolish to believe that the CDC's stated purposes for its use are trustworthy either. The CDC wants us to believe that their purposes are purely academic, just policy analysis, not law enforcement, except for in the areas of real estate and air travel and everywhere else. Their law enforcement tentacles keep extending, and they want us to believe that their purposes are strictly coronavirus limited, even when they bury text admitting they are not. In making this data purchase, the CDC requested expedited service. This is urgent. It's all about COVID-19, so come on, hurry up. But then in describing its own uses for the data, the CDC goes well beyond behavioral analysis in the virus context. They want to know about people's physical activity as it relates to chronic disease prevention, like how often they visit parks, gyms, or weight management businesses. They want to know how people move in response to natural disasters. And they want to make the data available agency-wide for really any use that they see fit in their ever-widening agency. The only thing the CDC doesn't want to do is explain any further. Repeated requests for comment were not even met with response. And frustrating beyond these abuses, or at least potential abuses, is what appears like a rare moment of bipartisan or cross-ideological congressional agreement that so far has accomplished absolutely nothing on the issue. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not commonly a there ought to be a law kind of guy, but any law about restricting government excesses, I'm listening. And with big businesses' cooperation and partnership in those government excesses, there are a lot of progressives listening too, which has created an uncommon congressional alliance. Last year, Democratic Senator Ron Wyden and Republican Senator Rand Paul led a group of otherwise ideologically opposed lawmakers: Chuck Schumer, Mike Lee, Bernie Sanders, Steve Daines, and many more. They all support a law called the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act, which would bar law enforcement from purchasing geolocation data or any other sensitive phone data for any purpose. But since its announcement over a year ago, that bill has done what most things do in Congress: rot. I see no news of movement, despite a collection of congressional supporters far ideologically broader than more commonly discussed ideas and bills. So of course, I wouldn't trust Congress to fix all that ails us either. Like any other constitutional value, our security against unreasonable search and seizure doesn't depend on suits imposing it on us. It depends on all of us maintaining it as a value ourselves first. If we don't have a culture that values it, the laws that value it aren't useful and won't last. Lawmakers can't instill these values in us, and besides, they're bound to miss a few things anyway. The current version of this bill only prohibits the government from purchasing your data, but it does nothing to stop the warrantless transfer of the information if the companies do that free of charge. And there are several reasons the data companies might want to comply voluntarily that don't involve a large check. They have regulatory deals with these agencies. They seek other government contracts with these agencies. Or, as we see commonly, often they have just plain old ideological agreement. The political preferences of business and government agencies often align. So sure, CDC, we'll hand you some personal data on the house because we don't really like the idea of the unvaccinated attending certain events or venues. Sure, ATF, we'll hand you some personal data on the house because we don't really like those evil gun owners, and we think you might like to know what conventions they attend. Sure, Uncle Sam in general, we will happily cooperate, so long as it means punishing our ideological opponents, because we don't really have any principles we aren't willing to violate in that pursuit. So long as we don't share and uphold these constitutional principles ourselves, not just as matters of law, but as matters of values to guide our personal and professional conduct, we won't have a government that respects them, and the actual loopholes carved into them will eventually erode them until they're gone. And the future where they're gone is not one that you want to live in, but we're supposed to take lectures about obliviousness from the people actively working on that demolition. There is nothing more oblivious than thinking a future where we constantly censor and disarm and search and seize is going to be prosperous. For that reason, and the others he explains, on the theme of unlikely agreement, that data executive is right. We would be pretty stupid to trust these people. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Parler, that is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.